There are many rites of passage to stagger through as you join the tribe of the homeless. Those milestones you tick off as you burrow further into the ranks of humanity's rejects. Finding yourself unceremoniously dumped on the streets indefinitely is obviously the first. It's frightening, but it's only the first. Anyone can do that. It is but the first step in the journey, and surprisingly banal in hindsight. It is the initiations of indignity that follow that separates the wheat from the chaff, the men from the boys, the hardened veterans from the wannabe pretenders. There is the first time you see the look of disgust in someone's face when they unexpectedly catch you bathing in a public lavatory. That look stays burned in your memory forever. They are the eyes you recall every time you spy that look in the future. There is the humiliation you feel the first time you eliminate your bowels in a public greenery and sobbingly try to cover your crime with the surrounding dirt, realizing belatedly you have no way to wash your hands until morning. That humiliation remains embedded in the pit of your stomach for all time. There is the first time you wake to a rainstorm in the middle of the night. Your person, your sleeping bag, and your remaining possessions drenched to capacity. They take days to dry and acquire a musty fragrance that follows you everywhere. There is the first time you awake in the night to find yourself being kicked, beaten, or robbed either by drunken louts out for a night on the town or by your fellow natives in the tribe of the homeless. There is the first time you are woken by a police patrol and forced to move your vagrancy elsewhere or risk arrest. And there is the first time you show willing to take them up on their offer, realizing it is the path to a warm bed for at least one night, and the subsequent backpedaling that proves their threat was nothing more than a posturizing feint. The first time you steal. The first time you beg. The first time you're spat on. The first time you're kicked. The first time you are offered money to peddle drugs. The first time you're searched for them. The first time you are offered money for a sexual act. The first time you accept. The first time you find yourself unexpectedly groped by one of your friends in the tribe, drunk to the point of delirium and motivated not by sexual desire, but a desperate need for any kind of human contact, any form of affection, any kind of misdirected balm for the loneliness. And the first time you experience the horror of watching another man's psyche shatter before you in a wailing torrent of shame, humiliation, and self-loathing when his pitiable advances are rejected. There is a first time for everything. These are the rites that humiliate you, harden you, hack away at your soul, and strip you of your humanity. And they don't end after you have been removed from the streets and placed in charity-approved housing. For housing is not a home. It is not the solution the public is misled into believing. It is a holding pen for humanity's rejects, often more dangerous than the streets themselves. Homelessness deceivingly repackaged as a successful resolution. I have yet to achieve all these milestones, but I have ticked off many. And I have come uncomfortably close to reaching others, particularly the less salubrious rituals that see you consciously chip away at your own dignity and self-respect in order to survive. Indignities randomly inflicted on you are a dime a dozen when you're homeless. It is those indignities you allow yourself to suffer that really prove your mettle. I found myself unexpectedly passing one of the smaller rites of initiation while staying in the night shelter at the Connection, a minor infraction compared to most other abuses and humiliations, but one that proved a major turning point in my ongoing descent. It was shortly after 2:30 in the morning and sleep was stubbornly elusive. The caterwaul of snores had been unusually subdued, but I had not engaged in enough physical activity during the day for my body to need sleep. My mind was racing, and my limbs were restless. I tossed. I checked the time. I turned. I checked the time. I stared at the ceiling. I checked the time. I stared at the wall. I checked the time. I paced to the lavatory with no real need to use it. I checked the time. I paced back to my cot. I checked the time. It was not even 3 o'clock and morning was still an infinite 3 hours away. Though I had been making valiant efforts to cut down on my smoking in the quixotic quest to quit, I found the sheer burden of time standing still to be the biggest barrier to those attempts. As the clock slumbered past 3 o'clock, I found myself stepping outside to the basement-level walkway for a cigarette, my sixth since going to bed. I had learned to make the act of rolling a cigarette a drawn-out ritual to help tick off the minutes and hoped to put that emerging skill to good use. It wasn't so much the act of smoking itself that made the addiction so difficult to beat, it was the activity that surrounded it, the ultimate make-work project of the itinerant. The art of time-wasting takes more discipline than people appreciate. I opened my tattered pouch of tobacco, a symbiotic blend of the fresh product I had purchased days previously, and the stale, sometimes crusty remains scooped from the cigarette butts I had picked up off the streets and outdoor ashtrays since then. I removed a pinch between my fingers and slowly distributed it on the rolling paper, painstakingly spreading it across the fold. I picked up the stubborn gravelly nuggets that had been mine from the discards of others, dropped them on the ground beside me, and spread the tobacco again, trying to distribute it as evenly as possible. I added a filter, then picked the delicate contraption up between my thumbs and middle fingers and engaged in the act of rolling with the slow, tender deliberation of a lover. I slipped my tongue across the sealing paste, leaving just enough moisture to fasten the tube without soaking the paper and making the entire endeavor useless. I pinched out the tuft of tobacco that poked through the open end and returned that precious smidgen to my pouch. Tapping the completed cigarette 3 times on its filtered end, I leaned back against the perimeter wall, placing the freshly rolled death stick between my lips. Rummaged through my trouser pocket until I found my lighter, fiddled with it between my fingers, and brought it close to my face. With a flick of my thumb I gave birth to a baby flame, applied it to the end of my tubular appendage, and waited for that familiar orange glow to indicate ignition was successful. I returned the lighter to my pocket, pinched my lips together and inhaled that melodramatic first deep plume of smoke tobacco addicts know so well. I exhaled, coughed, and took my second puff. A drop of water suddenly splashed onto the middle of the cigarette, rendering it useless. I cursed in annoyance. Another splash struck my arm. Then another on top of my head, followed by a brief trickle that suddenly stopped. I scanned the ground for sudden spots of dew to indicate a passing rain shower and saw none. A burst pipe, perhaps? I stepped away from the wall, turned around, and looked up. To be met with a powerful stream of urine splashing on my face. And in my mouth. I jumped back, bent over and retched. To my disappointment, no cleansing vomit was forthcoming, and I was forced to gag on the taste of stale tobacco and fresh piss. I looked up and recognized one of the other service users as he shook the remaining droplets to the ground, laughing hysterically. He tucked himself back in his pants and skipped away from the railing, still laughing. He was a regular client of the connection and had been denied entry to the shelter that night for drunkenness. Clients are regularly turned away and left to their own devices whatever the season, often causing chaos in the surrounding area. However, it isn't always a straightforward refusal. Should that client die during the night from the elements or misadventure, as has happened, a charity could be subject to legal action. Often, potentially troublesome clients are officially signed in, then nudged into making the decision to leave themselves. The responsibility becomes the client's, not the charity's, and the charity is freed of any legal consequences. It also helps them keep their numbers high and their potential workloads low. Often when charities appear to be at full capacity on paper, there are many empty beds still available, claimed by those who had nudgingly decided to leave after signing in. I ran back into the shelter screaming at the top of my lungs, waking many who had been sleeping. They weren't particularly perturbed due to the sheer entertainment value, something I had appreciated myself in the past. One of the staff did make a genuine attempt to catch the man, but by the time I had finished showering he had returned unsuccessful. The staff were genuinely sympathetic, and in all fairness there was not much they could do but file a report for the day center to investigate the next day. There wasn't much of an investigation. I was told there was nothing the connection could do about the incident as they could not be held responsible for the actions of clients outside their premises. I was also informed it was a common occurrence, and I should have known better than to stand against the perimeter wall. They advised me not to do so in the future. I filed a written suggestion they install a splash guard over part of the area to not only protect their clients from unwanted urination, but from the rain and snow. I was thanked with a ubiquitous stone-cold smile, and politely informed it was a wonderful idea they would take into consideration. 2 years later a splash guard still had not been installed. I can only assume funds are better spent on an impact and evidence coordinator to study the intricacies of nudge theory than keeping their clients dry. What do I know about charity finances? I'm only homeless. The connection may have responded to my urinary misadventure with bored disdain, but in the surrounding homeless community it was the social equivalent of my unveiling at a debutante's ball. No longer a wannabe pretender waiting in the wings, I had officially arrived on the scene. My piss-soaked noggin glistening like a gold-plated tiara, my ragged piss-streaked clothes billowing around me like a taffeta dress. It served as a mark of respect among those who had suffered the same indignity. Everybody wanted to be my best friend. And a best friend was exactly what I needed. It is common for people to pair up in the streets, often people with little in common. You need someone to watch your back, someone to confide in, someone to add their skill set to yours so that together you have a fighting chance at survival. And when you're a 120-pound middle-class twit who couldn't fight his way out of a damp paper bag in a rainstorm, you need a fighter with muscle. I had brains, I didn't have brawn. Without brawn, my brains weren't enough. I needed a figurative partner in crime. For the streets are vicious, and the homeless are not as cuddly as the charities would like you to believe in their heartfelt Christmas appeals. I was spoiled for potential suitors. The connection had failed to enforce any justice for my urinary assault, but a couple of newly befriended street enforcers did. A few days after the incident, the miscreant appeared sporting the painfully colorful bruising of a fresh black eye, cuts and bruises on his face and arms, and a limp in his right leg. His formerly cocky spark had been replaced with a sullen, downcast stare. Justice had been obtained. Street justice. I quietly approved. I quietly cheered. Many took me under their wings, providing a rudimentary education in street smarts. I was trained in the basics of street fighting, the forehead to the nose, the knee to the groin, the punch to the kidneys, the broken bottleneck hidden in your jacket pocket just in case. Go for the throat. I was given a tour highlighting the locations of every hidden CCTV camera in the surrounding area, and the even more important blind spots that are not remotely recorded. I was taught to develop my peripheral vision to better find dropped coins, wallets, cigarette butts, and other luxuries. Though theft was a rite of passage I steadfastly refused to embrace, my conscience was more than willing to accept the ill-gotten gains of others. I ate well for the first time in weeks. My tatty socks and underpants were soon replaced with clean new undergarments deftly lifted from the finest stores Oxford Street had to offer. It wasn't long before my coquettish acceptance of these stolen tokens of friendship turned proactive. A casually dropped need or request dropped into a group conversation almost guaranteed delivery before the end of the day. I began to offer my computer skills in exchange for whatever plunder I required at any given time, a valuable service in the chaotic bartering economy of the homeless. I was learning just how easy life in the streets could be if you allowed your morality to slip even a little, especially if the morality of others is there for the taking. Hypocrisy, thy name is Peter. My eating habits had improved. My fashion sense had improved. But I still needed a partner in crime. I still needed muscle. Skilled muscle. Brawn is nothing more than window dressing if the owner doesn't know how to use it. That narrowed my choices down exponentially. And we had to get along, be able to converse, joke around, banter, feel comfortable in each other's company. In short, we actually had to be friends. That whittled my options even more. At the time, and even in hindsight, it was the easiest of decisions. I made my choice. Poorly, as it turned out.